Hello, my name is Caritha Mitchell, and I'm absolutely delighted to be with you today. I am a literary historian and cultural critic, and I'm the author of Living with Lynching, which was published in 2011 by the University of Illinois Press. I'm also the editor of an 1892 novel by Frances E.W. Harper titled Iola Leroy, and I produced this edition of it in 2018, published by Broadview Press. But the reason I'm with you today is because I am also the author of From Slave Cabins to the White House, Homemade Citizenship in African American Culture, which, as you can see, is more evidence that the University of Illinois Press produces absolutely gorgeous books. So I'm sharing with you from this study today, which is a study that looks at canonical Black women's texts from the slavery era up to Michelle Obama. And what the study strives to do is offer a reading practice that is different from what we're typically taught. We're typically taught that anyone in a marginalized group, whenever you encounter their literature and art, you should presume protest is one of its major preoccupations. But what I have learned is that very often the success of marginalized groups inspires aggression just as often as it inspires praise. And so when that is the case, one comes to understand that marginalized groups and their art are not reacting to dominant culture so much as dominant culture is reacting to any success that they have in order to squash the success they have so that it can continue to parade as if it were actually dominant and not reactionary. So by looking at canonical works by Black women through the lens of success, I actually come up with very different interpretations of those texts. I begin in 1861 with Harriet Jacobs' Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. It's a novelized autobiography that basically tells her story of coming of age in the slavery era with everything against her. But I trace the way that she is defining success and redefining success in order to keep her eye on her own goals, despite all of the violence that's coming her way whenever she's able to achieve even a measure of success. In that same chapter, I look at Elizabeth Keckley's Behind the Scenes, or 30 Years a Slave and 4 Years in the White House. Again, it's a slave narrative, and the subtitle is gesturing to the fact that Elizabeth Keckley was the dressmaker to Abraham Lincoln's wife. So in that one chapter, you can see that we move from slave cabins to the White House. And in the subsequent chapters, I look at other canonical texts from different decades. In chapter 6, I end with Michelle Obama, looking at her public persona as First Lady as a performance text. I take seriously her decisions about hair, clothes, bodily presentation, as well as her decisions about how to decorate the White House. Taken together, those amount to a performance text of her public persona as First Lady, and I read that through the same lens of success that I read the other texts throughout the book. So with that foundation laid, I come to the coda of the study, which is where I'll be sharing with you today. And that coda is titled From Mom in Chief to Predator in Chief. And it helps us understand why 63 million Americans voted to move the country from mom in chief in the figure of Michelle Obama to a predator in chief in one Donald Trump, right? The person who 53% of white women nevertheless voted for, even after the recording of him bragging about grabbing women in their private parts. There's really nothing mysterious about understanding why such a move would happen. And so my coda goes to the heart of precisely that. Understanding know your place aggression takes the mystery out of why so many Americans were eager to see the country move from mom in chief to predator in chief. Because the nation's most common words and deeds aim to diminish people who are not straight, white, and male, those who are women and or of color receive a very consistent message: know your place. Donald Trump's political ascendancy highlighted what has always been most characteristic of the United States and most characteristic of this country's commitment to ensuring the unequal distribution of literally everything. Having made himself a political contender by questioning Barack Obama's citizenship, Trump continued to expose the true nature of American culture when he officially launched his presidential campaign by calling Mexicans rapists. Trump was more explicit than most, but anti-Mexican sentiment is part of the very foundation of this country. This rhetoric relied on long-standing, widespread hatred, and so Trump gained momentum by using it. Of course, Trump's denigration of women has been as consistent as his racism, and this fact has never presented a problem because American institutions are designed to operate most smoothly when women of color are denigrated. Meanwhile, everyone is assured that these women cannot possibly be victims or experiencing anything significant because they are supposedly such a non-issue. National discourse ignores women of color even as it targets them. The ignoring is part of the violence. Accordingly, when Trump publicly insulted a Latina in the mid-1990s, there was little outrage. Trump had repeatedly called Venezuelan model Alicia Machado, the 1996 Miss Universe pageant winner. He consistently called her Miss Piggy and Miss Housekeeping. He was not a presidential hopeful at that point, but the degree to which he could have been without such behavior hurting his chances has now been thoroughly demonstrated. Ultimately, Trump's rise reveals what all American institutions have in common. The government is no different from a private corporation or a public university. They were all designed to ensure that white men can hoard power and status, whether they deserve to, according to their own criteria or not. Once he became the Republican nominee for president, Trump's demeanor toward Hillary Clinton exposed the nation's commitment to know your place aggression as clearly as his 2 terms of harassing Barack Obama did. As was the case with disrespecting Obama, the cultural significance lies not simply in Trump's behavior, but in the support he enjoys. It is clear that many share the beliefs that undergird his racist, sexist words and deeds. Even if one assumes most Americans do not support the ideas, but simply tolerate them, it's important to understand why tolerance is such a common response. In short, this country operates on the firmly held belief that white men are entitled to whatever they deem to be their right. In fact, there is nothing Americans believe in more than they believe in white male volition. Trump's coziness with Russia's Vladimir Putin underscores this fact. No matter how problematic a behavior is by their own standards, white men who hold the power will not curb white men's free will. White men will certainly presume to know what's best for women and deem themselves to be the best judges of whether or not people of color are worthy, but they will not intrude upon another white man's right to do as he pleases. Making citizenship a violent mechanism that carves white men's benefits out of everyone else's pain and deprivation is the American way. And this fact took center stage when Hillary Clinton became Trump's opponent. In other words, know your place aggression is simultaneously reactionary and productive. Relentless attacks on people who are not white and male, even if or especially because they embody what the nation claims to respect, ensures that absolutely no standards are placed on white men. That is, white men are presumed deserving no matter what they do. As noted at the beginning of this study, citizenship is not respected based on behavior, but based on demographic. Americans are taught to see value in white men literally no matter what they do. Trump himself said, "I can stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose voters." And Americans delude themselves if they think this statement is hyperbole rather than an accurate reflection of their social and political reality. Know your place aggression is at the heart of US citizenship. As I've argued in another context, all of American culture, including American jurisprudence, has evolved to ensure that real citizens, white men, keep their license to do harm because others must sometimes be reminded that they are not truly citizens. So, when a white man literally kills someone, the nation's institutions mobilize to manufacture innocence for him. As cultural historian David Leonard has demonstrated so powerfully in relationship to serial killers. Serial killers in the United States are overwhelmingly white and male, and the response to them suggests that no matter what, white men should continue to enjoy the rights and privileges of American citizenship. I mean, after all, that's the only reason American citizenship was created. With white male license as its very reason for existing, the mechanisms of American citizenship flew into overdrive to oppose a female presidential candidate. So suggestions that Hillary Clinton was a problematic nominee only deflect from how thoroughly American culture was on display in the 2016 presidential election. Her success was used against her, as often happens for members of marginalized groups, because American culture is designed toward reminding them of their so-called proper place. I share that with you today from my book, From Slave Cabins to the White House, because it's important that we understand how US citizenship is currently operating. Unless we understand that right now it is geared toward protecting only the sense of belonging of straight white men and denigrating everyone else, until we can grapple with that, we can't actually make it stand for something else. And I sincerely hope that we all get much more serious about making US citizenship actually operate in a very different way. Again, my name is Caritha Mitchell. I am the author of From Slave Cabins to the White House, Homemade Citizenship in African American Culture. You can find me on Twitter at Prof. Corey. That's PROFKORI. Again, my name is Caritha Mitchell. It rhymes with Aretha, though it's not spelled that way. And you can, of course, find me at my website, carithamitchell.com, KORITHA Mitchell.com. Thank you so much.